Greetings and salutations, friends, and welcome back to the Horus Heresy lore breakdown. Now we have a very short one, The Dark King by Graham McNeill. Indeed, I think this was one of the very first stories they put out, and they did so in an exclusive special event format, only now being re-released again, and it talks about an encounter between Dawn and Conrad Curze. A rather interesting one as well. And despite its relatively short nature, this is an explosive goddamn book. It really is. Games Workshop really wanted to front load this one with as much awesome as possible to really just blast people off their feet with the idea of 30k really rolling in. And considering the massive success of the Horus Heresy series, I think it's fair to say that they succeeded. I mean, the very first chapter of The Dark King, again, bearing in mind, put yourself in the point of view of someone who's always been interested in 40k and you've heard about the Horus Heresy, but you've never actually read anything about it. You know really nothing about it except for a handful of tiny little 2 or 3 sentences lore blurbs about these mighty heroes and demigods bestriding the earth, you know? And the very first scene has Conrad Curze going completely insane as the visions lance through his brain of a shattered Imperium and a golden eagle falling from the heavens as he looks down and finally starts to realize as the fog clears that he's standing above the bruised, battered, and bloody form of Rogal Dorn. Oh. If they ever do a 30k TV series, this needs to be the trailer. It really does. Ah, that is good. And so, how did we get to this point? Normally, I goddamn hate it when a story starts at the beginning, because at that point I'm like, okay, well, now I know how things end. And after that, I can usually guess with a pretty goddamn high degree of certainty how we are going to be getting to that conclusion 5 minutes into the rest of the episode. But since this is such a short story, it actually benefits from not giving the reader enough time to really figure everything out, and especially with Conrad Curze, there is so much complexity dug in beneath that character's skin, to the point where I've made 2 videos on him, the latest of which was basically 2 hours long, that it does a great job of giving you that shock effect, which is the point of the whole starting at the end thing, without really giving you enough to work with for you to just ignore the rest of the story. Pretty well done. But how did we get to that point? It's a damn good question. So, the Imperial Fists, along with the Emperor's Children and the Night Lords, quite the overkill in my opinion, is in the middle of rendering a small system compliant. And Curze, of course, is of the opinion that no system is quite as compliant as the one in which he has thoroughly murdered everyone stupid enough to fight him. And I mean, you can't really dispute the point, can you? If they're all dead, well, surely they can't rebel in the future. There's a certain cold, hard logic to that, absolutely. But Dawn is not quite as, efficient in this regard as Conrad Curze, and takes offense at Curze eradicating all of his prisoners. He confronts Curze and orders him to stop the executions immediately because these people are no longer enemies, they are captives. And the planet must be rebuilt, it must be integrated into the Imperium, and these people must be shown that the Imperium bring more than bloodshed and violence. That is Dawn's point, and, well, to be fair, it probably would have been the better point in the long run, but Curze does not agree. He even makes an example of this. He gives a bolt gun to one of the prisoners, and tells him, "Do you want to kill me? Well, go ahead, no one will stop you," and then orders everyone around to not interfere whatever the prisoner may do. The scared little bastard doesn't do anything, and then Curze turns his back, and then he does something. unsurprisingly, I mean, you're already executing all of them. Of course he's gonna go like, well, I'm fucked anyways. It's not really much of a choice, is it? But Curze is far too fast, and the moment he so much as hears the dude move, he spins around and smacks his head off. And then goes, just looks at Dawn and goes, see? This is during one of Curze's more insane phases too, by the way, if the later books are to be believed. Now, this is also a little bit of the problem, because the Conrad Curze we see here is in pretty sharp contrast to the other Conrad Curzes we have come to know as well. This is the problem whenever you do any kind of a large-scale series like this with a bunch of different authors. They all have slightly different interpretations of Curze, but at this particular point in Curze's life, in the later books, he is currently considering a talk with his brothers, Fulgrim and Rogal Dorn, to explain to them his visions, to try and get them on side, and he's even created an entire document proving all of the crimes of the Nostraman government, and he wishes their permission to return to chastise that government. But again, that hasn't even been written at this point in time yet, so we don't get to hear anything about that. Presumably, we could also make up an in-universe reason, namely that around this time, Curze was having some really psychotic periods, and this might simply be him on one of his darker days, shall we say. Anywho, Dawn then says that he wants to have a meeting in private with Curze because this is no way to build an Imperium, and oh, he is right, because whilst if everybody is dead there is no one to resist, neither is that much of an empire. You do need some people to, you know, fight your wars and grow your food, etc. You need people, unfortunately, you know, at least until I can figure out how to make robots do anything and everything. Anywho, working on it, but still some distance away, unfortunately. Then we get a brief tale of how apparently Curze went to Fulgrim first, and had a lapse of insanity when he got his visions, fell to the floor, and because Fulgrim saw him in this state, he just spilled the beans and went like, yes, so I see the future. And in that future, the world's burning and Daddy wants to kill me. I imagine the look on Fulgrim's face as all of this is just laid out to him, completely apropos of nothing as well, from Conrad Curze of all people. He must just be like, wow, I came here to get drunk. This is a bit more than I was honestly expecting. You know, it's like going drinking with a friend and he gets a little bit too drunk and he lays out not only his entire life story, but that time when he did something really genuinely insane, possibly slightly illegal, and you're kind of just sitting there like, I wonder if I could somehow get myself so drunk as to forget all of this. Then Fulgrim, unsurprisingly, runs to Dawn and goes, right, so our brother is insane. And unfortunately, Fulgrim does not deliver it in the most diplomatic fashion possible. And instead of, you know, engendering any kind of sympathy from Dawn, Dawn gets really angry and runs to Curze's chamber and starts berating him. Honestly, I think Dawn meant well. I think Dawn was just so thoroughly shocked by all of this that he kind of wants to confront Curze and go like, you're crazy, the Emperor would never do this, get a hold of yourself, brother, that kind of stuff. But Curze almost immediately goes into a psychotic rage and damn near kills Dawn. He is then sequestered to his chambers, apparently aboard his own ship, which is an interesting choice there, although he is guided by a bunch of Dawn's Praetorians and Fulgrim's Phoenix Guard. One of Curze's adjutants then come to him and inform him that there is talk of the Night Lords being recalled to Terra, which there probably was talk of that in all due likelihood, and Curze wants to strike first. He fears that his brothers will use this minor incident. I love how he talks about it too, like, are they going to blame me for merely almost murdering my brother? Are they going to try and chastise me for something so minor? Oh, Jesus. See, this, again, it's very clearly Curze before he got much of his, you know, moral build-up. He is just an evil son of a bastard here. And he also talks about how, oh, you know, I'm trying to avoid the collapse of the Imperium by, you know, burning everything and spreading fear and terror, the very things that will eventually learn to the English lead to the collapse of the Imperium. See, that is the great tragedy of Curze that I've talked about like on 2 massive videos now. He tried so hard to avoid all of this, and when he finally realized that him trying to avoid it in his own way was actually what doomed them to this future, decides to just have himself be killed at the hands of an Imperial assassin, because it is the only way in which he can protect his fragile ego any longer. And with ego here, in case, I mean the very, you know, the very literal self of a person, not like ego as in pride, but your very persona, you as a human being. Curze is already practically shattered to the point that he has created an alter ego in Nighthaunter, but at this point, when he realizes that everything he has done to avoid this future has instead created it, his only option to maintain his sanity is to completely surrender himself to his visions, and therefore basically try to go, aha! I never could have fought the future anyways. My actions were preordained. I could never have resisted. It could never have been different. Whilst deep down, probably knowing that no, it could have. Honestly, due to the fact that, okay, so this is completely outside of the scope of the book, but I should do this in like a theory crafting video, which I might do at some point, but the video capture of the assassin killing Curze cuts out right before the assassin strikes. And right before this, Curze had been playing patty cakes, essentially, with human organs and bits, creating a lifelike statue of the Emperor. Maybe, just maybe, Curze had just enough time to create something that looked kinda like him, and then disappeared off into the night. Maybe, after 10,000 years of isolation, he has actually overcome the Nighthaunter. I know, I'm not pure fantasy, but 40k really does need a redemption story. Honestly, it does. But anywho, Curze now says that he is gonna take care of his guards. We all know what that means. And his advisor is to prepare the Night Lord's fleet for the return to Nostromo, where he's going to fix the planet's problem with lawlessness in a very permanent fashion. He easily dispatches his guards, because of course he does. At this point in time, nobody really quite knew what a Primarch would be able to, commit in the ways of overwhelming violence against other Legiones Astartes, but honestly, I doubt whether Dawn or Fulgrim ever really suspected that Curze would try to break out. Again, this was way back during the time when combat between Space Marines was an almost impossibility. It just simply wasn't something that was supposed to happen. He then returned with his fleet to Nostromo to wipe out the world. He also here plays a version of the Emperor's Tarot, the Lesser Arcana. Now, it is a hint unclear whether or not he's talking about the literal, Lesser Tarot, the tarot cards that we have now, or if he is referring to the Emperor's Tarot, the thing that will become the Emperor's Tarot, because, well, that was invented by Magnus, and not, as Curze states here, some ancient creation. So I think he's probably referring to just the Tarot, the one we have in reality. But the way he talks about it as well seems to suggest that it actually does have real power, in that no matter how many times he lays the cards, no matter how well he shuffles it, it always comes up in the exact same way. But again, questioning the in-universe consistency of something like this that was essentially created as a pitch for the rest of the series is a bit churlish even by my standards, I admit, but I need to point it out. That is kind of my job in a way. He then orders all of the ships to bombard Nostromo, and Sheng, by the way, doesn't argue with him, which he actually does in the later book, but that details, moving on. And they blast the planet with beams of las fire, as the fleets of Dawn and possibly Fulgrim close in behind them, coming out of the warp just as Night Hunter gives the order to annihilate the planet. Too late to really intervene or do anything to stop him. He then states that he will take this burden upon himself. He will bear it and he will not fear it, as he knows that the word of this action will spread to those in the Imperium that are willing to commit to making sure the Imperium's ideals remain immortal, for his father is ever so misguided in his belief in the goodness of humanity, and only fear of reprisal will ever bring stability. Now, I would immediately, of course, point out to our superhuman Primarch here that fear of reprisal did precious little to stop Nostromo from rising up, and again, this is why in the later books he was built upon so much as well. This Conrad Curze is destroying Nostromo whilst being completely aware of what he's doing. He's not overcome with rage or emotions or anger or by Night Haunter. This is a cold, calculated decision that Curze has come to through a process of logic. He has reasoned himself into the annihilation of Nostromo, which is again quite different from the Conrad Curze that we know in the later books, where this is partially an act of insanity. He does have a reason for doing it, of course. He has a rationale for committing this act, but as much as anything, it is an act of passion, one of violence, one of anger, and one of, quite literally, insanity. At that point in time, he is basically more Night Haunter than he is Conrad Curze, whereas in this story, he discards Conrad Curze and instead takes upon himself the mantle, as he states, of the Night Haunter when he destroys Nostromo. All in all, bearing in mind this short story was supposed to be one of the first, it's pretty good. I mean, for what it is, and also the production quality as well. Again, they pulled out all of the stops for this one with special sound effects for all of his doing, and God damn it. Oh, it makes me want like an actual show of this so much more. On the one hand, I know, when 40k finally becomes that mainstream as to have proper TV shows and movies, it'll probably be rent asunder and fucked to death by a million angry hyenas like Star Wars, but I just, when I read and listen to audiobooks like this, it's like, oh God, I want. Again, however, the Horus Heresy built far more upon Conrad Curze. The Conrad Curze in the later books is way more of an interesting and complex character than this Conrad Curze. This Conrad Curze is just evil, basically. Like, oh yes, fear, violence, and reprisals. Those are the only things I need in my Imperium. It's a bit harsh, my dude, but, you do you, I suppose. And speaking of one doing oneself, 18 minutes, 19, and a little bit due to the intro, etc., but this has got to be the shortest Horus Heresy single episode ever, doesn't it? Well, enjoy, because I doubt there'll be many more around this length, almost bite-sized, in fact. Until next time. I've been Arch. Thank you all very much for listening, and I hope to see you all again soon, since we still do have quite a few short stories left to go. Have a good day.